Before Sunset, the second part of the Before trilogy, directed by Richard Linklater, starring Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. We pick up the story 9 years after the events of Before Sunrise. Jesse has written a book about that one night in Vienna and is promoting it in Paris, when none other than Celine shows up at the bookstore to meet with him. We then find out that despite their promise from the final scene of the previous film, the two did not meet again in 6 months later in Vienna. Celine couldn't go because of her grandma's funeral, while Jesse did actually show up alone. The two of them then decide to go for a walk and a coffee, seeing as Jesse has a few hours to spare before his flight, and they begin to converse and, on the one hand, catch up as to what's going on in their lives, on the other, reminiscing on what was and what could have been. So, I have to confess that I loved Before Sunset even more than Before Sunrise. There is a magical quality to it that the previous film I feel couldn't have because of its very nature. See, in the first movie, we saw this young, romantic, hopeful love with no baggage yet, no worries for the future. This time we're sort of revisiting the very idea of that type of love from the perspective of older people. People who have gone through their share of problems in life, be it love related or not. What begins as them seemingly happy with where they are and who they've become, we gradually learn that there's stuff boiling underneath, stuff that is now coming to the surface because of the meeting and because of the memories that it evokes. And we get into those discussions marked with nostalgia, with regret, with unrealized hopes and resentments. And yet, despite this new negative light, neither the characters nor the film itself fall into cynicism. It's very clear that while we're now looking at romance from a totally different perspective, romance is not being denied. It's not people who no longer have hearts, it's rather that their hearts have changed and evolved over the years. I think once again the key strength of the film lies in its simplicity and the magnificent natural chemistry between the two leads. Hawke and Delpy are great together. Each of them manages to convey so much emotion, not just from what they say and how they say it, but even just from those silent little looks they give one another. And yet again, through all of that, you can buy that they're real people, that they disappear into the characters and become them. Also, once again, the writing is very good. This time around, Hawke and Delpy got credit for it, along with Linklater, seeing as they rewrote large parts of the dialogue to make it more natural and fit their characters better. I think that in terms of cinematography and the look of the film, Before Sunset is an improvement from the previous film. It was shot entirely on location in Paris, only during the afternoon, with careful attention to lighting and weather. Because the film essentially takes place in real time. The continuity of the shots was very important, and I'm happy to say that it was achieved. All the time it feels like we're in there with the characters, we're just following them. And also I feel like there was many more longer takes. I think the longest one goes for about 11 minutes, which to me is always a joy to watch. Final point I want to make is about the ending, which once again is left deliberately open, and depending on your own outlook on life and relationships, you can kind of fill the gap of what happens after the screen goes black. And you can go for a more romantic or a more cynical explanation. So, as you may have guessed by now, I adored Before Sunset. I think it's an insanely competent sequel, which cleverly builds upon what was said before instead of repeating it. And it takes similar themes but examines them from a completely new perspective. As a film, it's mature, witty, emotional, and all around